Hey, I'm Nico from Licks of the Beast, and in this video I'm gonna break down for you 3 licks from Dave Murray and Adrian Smith's live guitar solo, Walking on Glass. Walking on Glass was an unaccompanied guitar solo that Dave and Adrian would do about halfway through the show on the Somewhere in Time tour. It had a guitar battle style arrangement where they would each take turns playing licks over a guitar pad. They would then break into a harmonized lick that would lead to Dave playing the melody to Walking in the Air, which was a song taken from an animated holiday movie entitled The Snowman. The grand finale features 4 rounds of crashing chords and ad-libbed licks. The origin of this piece go back to the end of the Powerslave tour, when Nico McBrain and Adrian Smith, along with the guys from the bands FM and Urchin, did 2 small gigs together under the names The Entire Population of Hackney for one gig and the Sherman Tankers for the other. During that show, they played an early version of the ASAP song Silver and Gold. Adrian did this atmospheric guitar solo thing during the first 2 minutes, which I imagine was something he'd been working on, and that idea eventually would go on to become Walking on Glass. I think it's really fitting that they chose to do this on the Somewhere in Time tour, because this piece was like a time capsule in a way. A summary of where Dave and Adrian were at musically during that period. Adrian's playing around this time was quite reminiscent of David Gilmour, with lots of pre-bends and bend and release phrasing, whammy bar vibrato, and very tasteful licks in general. Dave, on the other hand, was at his most flowy. His tone was glassy yet round, and his playing had a liquid quality to it with very smooth and long stretched out runs. One final thing I should mention before getting to the licks is that this wasn't a purely note-for-note kind of solo. They would follow the same structure and overall idea for the runs they would play, but they would still allow for a little improvisation. So if you caught the show on 2 separate nights, you would have heard 2 slightly different versions of this piece. There are a few examples available on YouTube that are surprisingly good quality, especially considering when and how it was recorded, and I highly recommend you go and check those out. For this video, I picked licks from the Leicester show from October 14th, 1986, just because that was the best quality recording that I could find, and because I really liked the way they played on that particular night. Okay, so now let's get into the good stuff. Here are 3 licks from Walking on Glass that you need to know. The first lick we're going to look at is played by Adrian, and it goes something like this. So we're in the key of B minor, and Adrian is playing in this very familiar box position at the 7th fret. There's a lot of bend and release going on in the phrasing here, so it's very important to check the intonation of your bends. This lick is textbook Adrian. It's crisp and precise, but it has that almost lazy, dragging feel to it. Glenn Tipton from Judas Priest is another one who plays like that, where it sometimes seems like they're a bit behind the beat, and that they're gonna be late, but then they're always spot on the beat. It's a very accurate but very relaxed sense of rhythm they have, and it's really fascinating to watch a player like that. So anyway, let's break this lick down into 4 smaller sections so that it's a little more manageable. Starting with the first part. Now slowly. One more time. And then he goes into this. So now let's do that slowly. And one more time. Next we have this really cool double picked part. And he ends the lick with this phrase here. So let's do that slowly. One more time. The second lick is by Dave, and it goes kind of like this. And did you happen to catch the two little bits that Dave would end up using on the two Iron Maiden albums that followed? Well, there was this one from The Prophecy. And then this one that he would end up using on Public Enema #1 from No Prayer for the Dying. So this one is full-on Dave Murray style legato. So you want to make sure that besides the accented notes, everything else is played evenly throughout so that it sounds as smooth as possible. So let's break this one down into 4 parts as well, starting with the first part. And then he continues like this. Okay, this next part is really flowy, and it goes like this. And that part continues until the end like this. And notice the way that Dave moves from this 14th fret position of B minor to the 7th fret position using hammer-ons and pull-offs on the B string. The third and last lick is going to be that harmonized run that they do before the walking in the air melody. It's interesting because they're using completely different phrasing from one another, and yet it sounds really good together. So here's Adrian's part. And this is what Dave is doing. Together, it sounds like this. So the reason that they are phrasing their parts differently is because if you play Dave's part the same way Adrian plays his part, like this, it would sound like this together. Not the way you thought it would sound, is it? It's rather messy and the notes all kind of bleed into one another. So by playing his part with that steady B pedal throughout, Dave is providing a solid foundation off of which Adrian can then play his bouncy lick, and the sound of those parts together is what makes this part so cool. Alright my friends, that concludes this week's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please let the algorithm know by leaving a like, and do consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. I know I say this all the time, but it's the easiest and best way you can help me on this YouTube adventure. As always, thank you all so much for watching, and stay tuned for more licks of the beast.